Good morning, listeners. You're tuned to 100.9 FM, Albany Community Radio, and we have Dennis Comitti on the line. Dennis, welcome to Great Southern Sports Desk.
Steve, Adrian, how you doing?
We're going very well, thanks. And yourself?
Yeah, good, thank you.
Yes, Dennis, we don't want to make it this is your life, but if you can just give us a little bit of background on your football. We know about your football knowledge, but your actual playing career. And we're both West Perth supporters here, so we'll just love every minute of what you say.
Okay, West Perth supporters, so we're comfy landing.
Absolutely.
I started at West Perth in '67. I played in the juniors in the West Perth Council. I was an East Fremantle supporter growing up, actually. Strong East Fremantle supporter, but in West Perth district. And made my debut in '67. I didn't stay there long. '68 I had a good year. I kicked quite a few goals, over 60, but I got hurt late in the season, in the finals actually, in the second semi-final, and missed most of the next season, and became a disc jockey at about that time. So one required no dedication, the other required a lot of dedication. I took the line of least resistance, really, and probably only played another 10 games, spotted over about 3 seasons, and after that it was really broadcasting for me. So I went back to West Perth. I disappointed a few people at that time, I think, but I was lucky enough to go back as coach in 1983, 82, 83, 84 I was there. So a lot of those same people who I think were disappointed when I left as a player, well, I thought they were, probably were disappointed when I came back as a coach. I don't know, but they forgave me anyway. So good times, and a strong West Perth man now.
And I noticed, Dennis, being involved with the Sunday Football League, you had quite a successful career there.
Yes, I coached Maddington for a few seasons, and we had a good run. We had a good side, and coached Osborne Park for 1 season, and coached Kelmscott for 1 season. So played in grand finals in all of those years, bar the last one at Kelmscott. I had Kelmscott for 2 years. This is deep history for me now. I'm just going back. Kelmscott for 2 years. So, and we won a few premierships in that time. Maddington had a good run. They won 3 in a row, and then Kelmscott won their first one. And Osborne Park played off in a grand final. So enjoyed that, and those competitions were very strong at that stage. Probably like country football too. I think probably country football and suburban football in Western Australia, with the exception of the amateurs. I think they're still going okay, but things have changed because AFL football has spread so much over the weekend. It's on television, and it's much harder, I'm sure, for clubs to recruit players and get supporters to come along more particularly.
My brother's got very fond memories of those Maddington days.
Yes, well, he was an important player for us. Colin, your brother, played at West Perth as well. I think he played 1 league game, was it?
I think it was, yes.
Yeah, but a very good player, and he came out and lent his support. So I sort of cobbled together a side that had quite a few ex-West Perth players in those times, and they were terrific times. I really enjoyed my time at all of those Sunday clubs. That was after I'd stood out of football for about 1.5 years and decided, well, I could combine broadcasting and football, with broadcasting sort of as, if you like, the upper hand, but the football was the add-on. But at the same time, I took it seriously enough to try and get out there and recruit, and they were terrific friendships made then that I still have. I've had a couple of reunions in the last couple of years, actually.
And also, too, not many people know, when I was chairman director of the Sunday Football League, we made you our patron.
That's right, yes, and I enjoyed that as well. I mean, leagues like that, as I say, were struggling with the advent of the AFL and the spread of the AFL, so and you need those leagues operating well. I'm still associated with West Perth. I'm their number 1 ticket holder at the moment, and I don't get to see many games, but at the same time, I've got a lunch actually this week, so you try and sort of help them turn a dollar, because it's not an easy time for the lesser leagues, because with football played on Friday, Saturday afternoon, Saturday night, Sunday evening, I mean, it really is hard for someone else to get a look in, opposed to the AFL, which is the number 1 game in town.
One thing West Perth do well, Dennis, is I know my brother still keeps up with Mel Winnan and all those chaps. They have their fortnightly or monthly cup of coffee.
Yes.
And he enjoys that very much, catching up with those, I think.
Yeah, they're good days. I don't get to all of them during the footy season in particular, but I get to quite a few, and I even catch up with some of the old East Fremantle guys as well. from my childhood. I sort of love to take them out for a coffee and reminisce as well, because although I sort of became a West Perth man, I think those memories of when you're a kid and you follow a footy team are very strong, and the memories are vivid. So I just like to have a coffee with those fellas. I know the history, I think, better than they do. They've sort of got on with their lives. I'm mired back in the 60s. But at the same time, they were very important to me, because they were the guys actually that created my love of football, and I've told them that, so any success I may have had is in some part due to them.
You can always say, Dennis, you can take the West out of Yokine, but you can never take the boy out of Yokine.
Well, that's right. The boy's still in Yokine, to be honest. I'm calling from Yokine.
Dennis, back in the 60s, back in 1968, in fact, I was one of the £10 Poms that came over.
Yep.
And red and blue was my favourite colours, so I thought West Perth. And my father and my brother and myself, we go to the football at Leederville Oval religiously. And one I loved was Stephen Smith on the half-forward line, with those raking drop kicks.
Yes,
It's a pity the drop kick's gone out of the game. I realise there's no margin for error, and of course it's a very quick game now compared to the 60s. But it would be lovely to see just now and then that drop kick come back in.
It would be, wouldn't it? You can imagine the coach, he'd sort of go off his face.
Oh, absolutely.
That would be the last thing that a coach would want to see. But as you say, it's just because it's more error-prone. I look back on, I still have a lot of tapes from that time, not of my games, but of grand finals and things that I do a little work on sometimes with a couple of the people at Seven, sort of getting some history down. We've put some voices to some old tapes as well, and it's interesting to see the drop kick in those games. I mean, the most dangerous place in the world was actually to stand on the mark, because quite a few of them didn't work, but they came quick, and like ducking for cover on the mark. It's quite funny, actually, and when they worked, they were terrific, and they were good to mark, and they got there quickly. But when they didn't work, as was often the case, not always. I mean, some players were very good at it. Other players had delusions of grandeur and thought they were good at it. But those that were good could really sort of kick it a long way. I mean, compared to the drop punt, it probably went another 15 or 20 metres. So that was some sort of kick when it was used expertly. But
I found a very graceful kick.
I don't think we'll see it back anytime soon.
No, I don't think so. What about some old names, like Johnny, Nicky Forak, Mel Winnan, of course, Bill Dempsey? I would imagine you'd still have a beer or two with them, would you?
Well, we catch up more a coffee than a beer, although with Bill, he doesn't like drinking coffee, but at the same time we have to insist. Mel, on the other hand, likes a coffee over a beer. Those functions that Adrian was talking about sort of happen regularly, and Bill and Mel are always there. Some of the great names turn up: Peter Stewart, Brian France, Les Fong is there often as well. Manags has been along. I mean, it's more the players of the 60s and 70s than it is the more recent players, because those guys in a lot of cases still have young families or kids who are at high school or whatever. But for the players who have sort of, if you like, got their families off their hands, a weekend at the footy and then a coffee on a Tuesday or a Monday afternoon is good value for them. And we not only reminisce, but we talk about how the current side's going as well, and anything that might be on the agenda as far as footy's concerned. So I would say that West Perth have the equal of any past players organisation, not only in Western Australia but South Australia. It's a very strong unit, and it's really good to keep up.
Yeah, and how did we beat Claremont in the grand final?
This year?
Yes, this year.
Well, as the number one ticket holder, I've got to say we are some chance. But as Dennis Comitti, the football oracle, in inverted commas, I don't like our chances. Don't quote me.
No, the numbers are against us, that's for sure.
They've got a very good team, haven't they? But it's more difficult these days to sort of beat sides like that when they've got so many listed players. But Claremont, in fairness to them, most of the listed players are players that have come up through Claremont's ranks. So, I mean, you can't take anything away from them. It'll be interesting next year for Claremont, for example, when most of the listed players, well, all of them, are going to be at either East Perth or Peel, which seems decidedly unfair for Claremont. I mean, they've done such a good job of producing young players, and then suddenly they just wander off to other clubs. If I was at grassroots level at Claremont, for example, I'd be very unhappy. I mean, what some of the AFL teams don't get, particularly, well, the Eagles and Fremantle in this case, is that a lot of people prefer their waffle teams, particularly those that work in the lower levels in junior football, and their proudest moment is to see some young kid that they've been associated with, get to their league team.
Yes.
and represent Claremont, or it might be West Perth, but Claremont have done such a good job with it. To have them go and play against Claremont, they need to be very careful that a lot of people in those grassroots areas don't get disenchanted and just turn their back on footy. And they've actually got to pay for what people do now for nothing.
Right, big question, Dennis. I noticed in the last few years, players, I'm talking AFL now, players kicking impossible goals from the boundary line, yet put them 30 metres dead in front from a set kick and they barely get through for a point. It's as though they have stage fright.
Yep.
Have you guys in the commentary team discussed this?
Well, I think everyone has discussed it. That's probably one of the areas in football that hasn't improved all that much. I mean, some players still are very good at it, but that's always been the case. I think sometimes players get too much time to think, and as a result, what's intuitive and works sometimes doesn't work when they get ample time to mull it over in their mind before they take the kick. That's why I think now a lot of players like to play on, a lot of players like to dribble them through on the run. But, yeah, it's not an aspect of the game that you could say has definitively improved over the years. I mean, we see a lot of easy goals missed and sometimes crucial ones, and when they're crucial ones, that probably makes them harder to kick still, because players understand the importance of the goal they're trying to kick.
Fair call. Right, so you're renowned for your quotes, and I was just going to give, I've got a list of 10, but I won't go through the whole 10.
I wouldn't.
No, but a couple that come to mind, and one is, that's a good mark from Goods, seeing the good and the bad today from Goods. Question for you, with your quotes, do you have a tablet in front of you with a whole list? And because you seem to, it flows very well in your commentary, and you seem to be able to pick one out of your brain and make it appropriate for the time,
Well, footy's a pretty predictable game, so, I might have just a word or something written down sometimes, other times not, but they're not works of art by any stretch of the imagination. I mean, I watch a lot of football, and footy games, what they are very similar. I mean, there's a certain tempo to most football games. You know what's going to happen. There are going to be stoppages, boundary throw-ins, kick-ins, free kicks, marks. I mean, there are going to be stoppages where, if you want to say something, you can always work something in. So you just need really to be patient if that's what you want to do. Some people don't like to do that. I mean, other people might put statistics in there. I try and put some statistics in there as well. But also just make the odd remark. For no other reason than... when I've gone to the football, I used to love going to the football as a young man, and I always associate going to the footy with having fun. And some of the funniest times I've had have been around football clubs and footballers. I tire of the science and the drudgery of it sometimes these days. I'm a man who earns my living sort of covering the AFL. I understand that, but sometimes it becomes a very austere workplace, and I go to the football and make smart aleck remarks if I'm not commentating, so I see no reason to stop when I am commentating.
No, it comes across so naturally. There's a couple more I want to give you because Adrian will know why I'm going to read this one out. Liam Anthony, being a North Melbourne supporter as I am, remember, Liam Anthony's birthday this afternoon. Well, I guess it was his birthday this morning as well as any time after midnight, actually. I thought that was a good one of yours. And the other one...
I'm not sure about that, but yeah.
Yeah, well, I thought so. But my wife's Eagles member. Very disappointed, of course, yesterday's result. But and here comes Kerr with delusions of adequacy. Thinks he can get among the big fellas.
Well, I think a lot of players have those too. Yeah, that's something I sort of do use regularly because I'm sure it applied to me as well as a footballer. What we do forget, of course, I think, as supporters and commentators, is it's a very hard game to play. And to play it well at that level is very tough. So, again, you don't need to mock anyone, and I don't try and do that. I don't think I do.
No, it doesn't come across that.
It's not intentional. But at the same time... I have the greatest respect for the guys that play footy because it's one of the more brutal games in the world, and they're very brave to do it. But it still doesn't mean you can't have a bit of fun.
No, and I was just going to this last one. He pulled that one out of his nahas. I mean, that's a classic. That one.
Well, bless him.
Adrian,
just turning to an issue that's plagued the sport, Dennis, and you've obviously been around the periphery of it, the Essendon drug scandal.
Yeah.
Where do you think that's going to finish up at some point in time? There's stories around that they may lose the points for the season, or...
Well, I think that it's a situation that has been a shambles, really, not from anyone's point of view, other than there really is no stoppage, if you like, no sort of courtroom approach to this. People can get out there if they've given evidence to WADA or ASADA and speak openly and say whatever they like in the media. We've got people who refuse to speak to ASADA at this stage, and they can talk in the media, or WADA, and that's a strange thing, and it's seen this whole debate really run with a momentum that's rarely seen. I mean, had we just been told there's an inquiry and we'll get the details in August, I think that would have been the best way, but of course it doesn't work that way, and if you think back to Lance Armstrong, of course that was played out in public as well. So there's been a lack of propriety about this. The stance I've had from the outset really has been to let it play out, see what happens, and then form a point of view. I think in the media a lot of people are almost defending a point of view now. A lot of journalists have sort of jumped in, quoting their sources in inverted commas and saying, this is what I know. And if the scenario does change at all, they're not prepared to change because they've backed themselves into a corner. So I think a lot of the press and coverage of this has been compromised to a certain extent as well. It's been a shambles, well-intentioned shambles, but nevertheless, it's not a good situation. If you're asking me what I think will happen, I don't know, other than I think we're probably being prepared for Essendon to lose their points. I just get the feeling it's like those pre-budget leaks. A lot of people are saying it sort of around the corridors now that, Essendon could lose their points. I think this is something the AFL are sort of very close to, and if it's out there, then I give it some credence, and I think probably, if you were to source it back, you may source it back to the AFL. That's just one man's opinion. But they've got no control over what the penalties will be. They may sort of try and assist ASADA as best they can and sort of take them down a particular path. I've got so much sympathy for the players. I think if you're a player at a club, you don't expect the people ministering whatever to you, sort of healthcare, whatever it might be, but even drugs, to be, if you like, a rogue sports scientist or a rogue doctor, and that's what we're starting to see, or it's been sort of inferred. I just think that's something that is hard to fathom. And if I were a young man at a football club, I certainly wouldn't be second-guessing the club doctor or any sports scientist that may be there. They've been put in place by my club. And when I even sort of buy something like a second-hand car or, dare I say it, a brand new car, I just sign the pieces of paper. By saying this on radio, I'll probably get 50 people now sort of ringing me wanting to sell me something. But I go in trusting people, and for the life of me, I think some of these players are being held to a very high standard, a very high standard that's extreme. I think in your football club environment, to think that you would have to cross-check everything that's done. I mean, where do you draw the line? And I think the rules in some cases are an ass. I mean, they say that, I heard John Fay say recently that once it's in your body, you're gone. Well, I mean, if you go to your local doctor just for a regular checkup or whatever, and he decides he wants to inject you, do you grab the needle and run it down to a local laboratory and have it checked? I mean, that if you can't trust people, and this is why my sympathy is with the players, because if you take it to the nth degree, it's ludicrous.
Yeah, I've got a good friend of mine in Melbourne, a mad Collingwood supporter. He's been busy putting gallows all up around Windy Hill. He reckons they should go, but you're right.
I think heads may roll, but as I say, my chosen position is to let it play out. I think those above the players, to some degree, will be penalised, and some of them, I think, quite strongly.
Well, some of the commentators are already saying that 9th is the new 8th position already, and vying for the 9th position. So it's a wee bit...
Which certainly helps the local teams, Fremantle and West Coast, because Essendon are running in the top 4. So both our clubs could benefit, although West Coast probably need to win a game to help themselves at some stage.
Dennis, we'll call it the Fs, the 5 frustrations in your commentaries, for yourself, commentating a game. Could you list, say, I've said 5, but say 3 or 4 of your major frustrations when you do commentate matches?
Well, not many. It's a pretty good spot to be in. It's a good seat. I wouldn't change it with Andrew Demetrio. You got a good view, and you got all the
I thought you were going to say rule changes.
You and instant replays, so you couldn't ask for much more. No, I don't have many frustrations at all. I mean, I go along sort of enjoying what I'm about to do and generally enjoy it while I'm doing it. It's just a question of if you're having a bad day sometimes, as all people do, whatever profession they're in, sort of you'd want it over sooner rather than later, but there aren't too many of those, sort of really bad days, technical problems or whatever it might be. So, no, I go along to the football, sort of with high expectations of having fun, and almost without exception, that's the way it goes.
Excellent. I had a couple of scribbled down, like rule changes, and that must be a bit frustrating for commentators, players in general, really.
I hear Adrian's gone that route. He's become an umpire.
Oh, I was, yes.
Wow.
Even my brother chopped me up one day on the field.
I never thought I'd see that.
Yeah, we did.
Well, my assistant coach at West Perth when I was there was Clinton Farmer.
Yeah.
And his son is Luke Farmer, who is number 4 on the AFL umpiring panel. And for those that can remember Clint, certainly one wouldn't have thought he would have sired a umpire. He was a man who played extremely close to the echo of the whistle.
Yeah, my brother often wondered we were born to the same mother.
Yes, there you go. I mean, no, look, they've got a very unenviable job in our game. I think they do a good job by and large. Very hard game to umpire, particularly the way it's played these days with so many numbers in one half of the ground. That's a lot of bodies to see through. I mean, you're asking them to do sort of finite work in what is chaos, if you like, on occasion. But and I think generally they get through it pretty well. I don't like the move that we've seen in the last couple of months where suddenly it seems harder to get a free kick. No one knows how this happened, but it certainly happened if you look at the figures. I just think that there's been a lot of disillusionment in the last month. A lot of people said when it happened, or had been calling for it to happen, and when it happened, they said, well, this is terrific, sort of, it's got a little more manly now. It's harder to get a free kick. But, of course, what you do there is leave it more, if you like, to the umpires and their discretion. Now, you can't, I don't think, have discretionary free kicks. It's either a free kick or it's not. And with the sort of situation we had going on with the hand in the back, if a bloke put his hand on someone's back, that it was a free kick. You mightn't have agreed with that, but at least you knew what it was for. And that came in, and we got so pedantic about it because we went away from what we've just come back to, where you get this discretion of the umpires, you get the soft and the hard free kick, supporters think they're hard done by, players think they're hard done by, and suddenly now, I reckon in the last 5 or 6 weeks, without exception, I've seen games over a weekend where the umpires are really being challenged coming off the ground by supporters. Roundly booed, happened on Friday night, happened again yesterday in the Essendon Western Bulldogs game, and I'm just not sure that it was at this level going back 2 months. I think people may have thought, well, we don't like some of this because it's a bit soft, but I think they understood what was a free kick more so than they do at the present time, and I think it's going to get worse unless someone gets a grab of this.
To make an open game, Dennis, would you be a proponent of, say, the offside rule? Say have 4 players from each side. Adrian's cringing as I'm saying this, but because he doesn't like soccer. But have 4 players from each side and the opposite half of where the ball is to just keep it open. It seems to me a lot of the defenders are holding the ball, waiting for their midfield and forwards to go forward.
Well, no, I don't like that idea. I don't like sort of marking or petitioning off any parts of the ground or having a head count or whatever. I think our game is what it is. I'll be watching with interest with the interchange cap. I think the way to make it hard for players is to let the players tire themselves out. I mean, they just can't run from end to end. If they're tired, and I feel for our champion players because they're constantly coming up against fresh bodies, blokes that are just out there to prevent them getting the footy, and because they're playing less minutes are able to do that. I'm all for a salary cap, not a salary cap, a interchange cap rather. It was never designed to be a tactical tool. It was designed, it was sold as a health measure for the players, something that was going to sort of help them, and clearly it's gone in a direction no one anticipated. It came in the mid-90s. The clubs that were pushing for it were the West Coast Eagles and Essendon, who had very good lists. See, I can't understand why the poor clubs, the talent-poor clubs in the competition, shoulder to shoulder with the talent-rich clubs, because those rich clubs, talent-rich, we're talking about, may have depth to 25 or 26. So they've got better players through 22. What sort of makes me sort of look at it with disbelief, really, is that these clubs who have got 14 or 15 good players still think it's a good idea to have uncapped interchange. I find that from a competitive point of view, if I was one of those clubs that's struggling at the moment, I would be wanting interchanges as low as 50 just to keep the buggers off. You know, it's sort of, so your best 14 or 15, I think, have got more of a fighting chance than if they're playing against fresh blokes who are clearly better with more depth.
I know, Dennis, when I was responsible bringing the interchange rule into the Pilbara in the Fortescue League in 1980. We went from two-man, from 20 a side to 22. And the main reason then, it was, as you say, it was one that being a hotter climate and also being single-team clubs, it gave two extra guys a chance of a game on the Sunday.
Yeah, that all makes sense. I mean, I'm not anti-interchanges.
No.
So I don't, look, aesthetically, I don't like the look of it. There's only a couple of games in the world that change players without stopping the game. Ice hockey's one, and that's always struck me as a bit of a mess. You know, you watch it, and this is one of the reasons the AFL, I think, are unhappy about where interchange has gone, simply because of the look of it. I've always maintained I'd like to see the interchange operate after a goal is scored. Have as many as you like, but only after a goal. So there is some danger that you won't get the people you want on the ground when you want them on the ground. And that way it sort of highlights the fact of who's going on and who's going off. That is one of the problems current-day commentators have is, and I'm sure spectators do too, just who the heck is on the ground, because they're coming and going like Brown's cows. Now, that is purely out of self-interest that I say that, but I think if players were coming on during breaks, automatically the spectators' eyes would be drawn to the interchange, and you could still get a high number, but you'd need a high-scoring game.
Yep.
And I think it throws the emphasis back on the coaches. I think at the present time, coaches aren't really coaching. It is impossible to know what's going on. Can you imagine the little fella with the magnetic board these days? I mean, it's a myth to think that these coaches know what's going on. Nobody knows what's going on. They might have a rough idea of what's going on, but if you're trying to get particular blokes on one of theirs, good luck to you, because you know, like it's a strange situation now where the coaching aspect of the game is more midweek than during the game itself. That's not to say it doesn't exist. We've seen some things in recent times with Carlisle going forward, Reed going forward, those sorts of moves, which take us back a bit. They were big moves of past eras, and they're good to see in games, the big move where a coach does something dramatic. But it's less and less simply because they believe in their formulas and because the interchange makes it so much more difficult to bring those changes about.
Right, Dennis, we want to just go one step ahead of Basil Zemplis for Thursday, and we'd like to get your tips, if we may, with 7 rounds to go, so this coming round.
Yes, well, you'll have to tell me who's playing.
I will do that. North Melbourne against Carlton on Friday, which you'll probably be broadcasting the match.
Yeah, we're doing that one. You would think Carlton, I reckon. Carlton.
Yeah. As much as it pains me to say, I agree with you on that one.
Well, North Melbourne are just hard to get your head around, aren't they? I mean, that was another bad loss at the weekend.
Absolutely, and Brad Scott's denying that there's a trend. You know, this is what amazes me.
Yeah, well, I look, when they play well, they're very good, North Melbourne, but I've said it a couple of times this year during commentaries that they really are bullies. They sort of bully bad sides, and they're very good at beating up on bad sides, but they're not very good at beating anyone who's much good. So this is a test for them. Not suggesting Carlton are great, but if they can win this, then there's still some hope to make the finals. That's the crazy thing.
Yeah, but I think they haven't got the full belief to play 4 quarters of football. That's my.
Well, you're probably right.
But anyway, Hawthorn against the Bulldogs.
Hawthorn should win that, but I saw the Bulldogs on Sunday, and they were very good. They were very unlucky. They got a couple of horrendous umpiring decisions, which have been, in the press and written about. So they're an improving team. They've got something to look forward to, and I didn't think that was the case a couple of weeks ago, the Bulldogs. I thought, they're going to be a basket case for some time. But looking at some of their kids at the weekend, and they still had their top 2 draft picks from last year not in the team, the Bulldogs might be able to turn this around much sooner than I expected, but they won't beat Hawthorn, I don't think.
Right. GWS against Essendon?
I think Essendon, no doubt about that.
You don't have to think too hard on that one.
Well, it's embarrassing, really, for an elite competition to have a team that's getting beaten this easily. Model was flawed, I think, with GWS. They may be a good side in a couple of years, but a lot of these boys are going to get very disillusioned, I think, about what's happened to them, and it may affect them for the rest of their careers.
And Gold Coast, they're on the improve. They're up against Collingwood.
Collingwood will win that. I think Collingwood are actually going to be a key player later if they get some people back.
Right. St Kilda and Port Adelaide?
Port Adelaide, they're on the right track too. I think Port Adelaide will win that.
Right. Melbourne against Brisbane?
Well, Brisbane very impressive against your mob the other night. Look, Melbourne, well, I saw them on Saturday and they were very poor in the rain against Geelong. But under Neil Craig, they certainly are starting to play like a poor team, which actually is an improvement. They are what they are. They're a poor team, but at least now there's some semblance of being competitive about them, although Saturday wasn't their best. Now, they'll lose this, but again, Neil Craig is the man for that job, I think.
Right. And the Sunday fixtures, Richmond up against Fremantle?
That'll be a good game. No Pav. Look, Richmond have been disappointing the last fortnight, very disappointing. But I think Fremantle, but it wouldn't surprise me if the Tigers got over them over there.
Will you be commentating in that game, or?
I'm just thinking. No, I'm in Adelaide for Adelaide and Geelong, and I've got a Saturday game, but I can't. St Kilda and somebody. But I'll get around to that. Don't ask hard questions, Steve. I've plenty of times early in the week.
It is, and I'm going to be interested to see how these change between now and Thursday night.
They won't change.
Okay, and of course, Adelaide and Geelong. So
Adelaide were pretty good on Friday night. I mean, but that's as good as they can be because they can't kick enough goals. It'll be interesting to see what happens to Steve Johnson. And, I saw that game, as I say, and Steve will be lucky to be playing, and that's crazy. I mean, they were winning that game so comprehensively that
senseless,
they didn't need for him to run off the rails, and he was having such a good day. But Geelong should win in Adelaide.
Right, and the last one, of course, West Coast up against Sydney.
Well, it'll be Sydney, I would think. Although West Coast, talking about getting some players back, but I think Sydney are pretty match hardened at the moment, and I would be surprised. I think West Coast can take it to them as they did with Fremantle. Whether they can stay with them is the big question. I think Sydney will win.
Go on, David.
And one last tip, Dennis. Who's going to coach the Eagles next year?
No idea. You're about the fourth person today who's asked me that. And I really have no idea. But John Worsfold, we wish him well. I mean, if there's any bloke who deserves to go out in his own terms, it's John.
Yes.
He's done a terrific job, and all the success the West Coast Eagles have had, really, he's been part of. Well, there are situations that fall open that are promising and others generally that aren't. More often than not, jobs are open because teams are going badly. In this case, I think whoever gets the West Coast job is taking on a pretty good team. If they all get healthy next year, it wouldn't be a bad job to have.
Okay.
And statistically, you've gone for 8 away teams.
Have I?
You have. Yeah.
I'll ring you back.
And one other question.
Yep.
Frequent flyer points.
Yes.
Is that how you get to America every year?
Well, if I had my way, I think I'd stay in Yokine, but the family think they're great. What do you do with frequent flyer points? You fly.
I know Kevin Rudd's trying to catch up with you.
Why?
And one other question: when hopefully we can have another interview down the track, Dennis, because we've thoroughly enjoyed this one.
Right, Steve.
But the gridiron.
Yes.
Yeah, you're a fanatical gridiron supporter, I heard.
Well, I like it. I do like it. It's not as good as our game, I don't think. But I'm a soccer man as well. I like the soccer. I sort of have the sort of teams around about, sort of in various places just for an interest. I love the soccer on a Saturday night if the footy's not on. Clearly, they don't generally go up against each other head-to-head every month of the year. So after the footy, I like getting into the soccer. But, yeah, the gridiron I have an interest with. I really like the game, and that's where the nickname for the West Perth team came from, actually. Their new nickname, they were the Cardinals. Unrelated to me, but they became the Falcons, and the reason for that was the Atlanta Falcons. There was a connection with one of the board members going back some time, and he was a marketing man as well. He didn't have a clue what a Cardinal was, so he pushed and pushed and pushed until they finally accepted that the Falcons was something they could sort of market
Relate
do
to,
something with.
Yeah. And one other thing, do you get many opportunities to see your son wrestling?
Not many. He's not doing much wrestling at the moment because he's got a bad back.
He's injured. Yeah.
He's injured, but my superannuation plan is on hold at the moment. But, I'll get the bugger back and fit. Don't worry about that.
He's not on the payroll still, is he?
I've got between he and his mother, I'm not sure. That's the best answer I can offer.
Well, we've gone over 35 minutes now, so I thank you. Yeah, and I thank you very much for your time.
Pleasure.
And hopefully we can catch you at the end of the season. You give us a bit of a wrap up.
Good on you, boys.
Thanks very much for that, Dennis. Cheers.
Thank you very much, Dennis.
See you, Adrian.
Thank you, Dennis.
Bye.